talking about, the title is basically The Next Chapter. And it's all about assessing your options for a career pivot or a career transition. And if you think about it, there's so many things that you can do. There's so many opportunities. And what we're going to discuss today is how to prepare you to be more strategic, follow your passion. Maybe you can contribute in different ways. It's really trying to understand what you want, what your mindset is, and how to go about it. And we have these amazing experts who can help champion us through. So let's get started with the first question. So Maya, successful career transitions require reflection, with a focus on personal and professional growth. What would you say are the common factors that executives should consider either anticipating a career pivot and or doing during the career pivot? What would be your comment there?
Yeah, I think I think life transitions are hard at the best of times, and with the amount of identity that we tend to have wrapped up in our careers and our jobs, career pivots are kind of particularly can be challenging, regardless of if it's in the form of retirement or a change in scope or industry or role. And what I'll share is what I personally feel is the most important thing to consider that I often feel gets overlooked, especially in the interest of kind of strategies and tactics. And I have no doubt we'll talk today about strategies and tactics and things to do. But the big thing that often gets overlooked is around mindset and identity. And that requires introspection, and it requires pausing, which we're not very good at because we're on a hamster wheel and we're quick at running to the next thing. And so I highly recommend kind of stepping back and doing that inner work to crystallize for yourself, not just what are your skills and talents, but what energizes you and what drains you, and what values are important to you, and getting to that level of your purpose and motivation in life. How do you want to contribute to this world? Dare I ask, who are you without the doing, right? But taking the time to create the space for that deep reflection, I think, is kind of a foundational step that will set people up to embark on a career pivot with a completely different mindset and level of clarity than you would have if you just approached it from a tactical, okay, well, I could take board rules, or I could do some coaching, or maybe I could do my own consultancy. And not only that, but it will make you more fulfilled in that next space when you do step into it, because you'll have clarity as to why you're going in that direction and what you want to get out of it.
Maya, thank you for that. And just a related question, which is not on our list, but very, very related, in terms of how to reflect. Do you suggest assessments or a coach? How do you get to that point of pausing, reflecting, a retreat? What are some of the things you would recommend?
It's a great question, and it's kind of different personalities will gravitate to different things, and it's a little bit of find your own path. I do think that working with a coach, and obviously it's important to find the right fit for you. Coaching is a little bit like dating. You don't marry your high school sweetheart always, sometimes, but mostly, finding the right partner to create that space for you and to push you and hold up the mirror but retreats, and sometimes even sometimes even just journaling and personal reflection, getting some questions from the internet that help you, or values exercises. You can find loads online now. So it doesn't have to be, but having an independent coach, I've found, can be really helpful.
Oh, Maya, thank you. Thank you for that. We're now going to talk about, again, we're in this pre-career transition considerations segment of our discussion. So when it comes to succession planning as a career pivot consideration, Dennis, what are the key factors to consider when engaging or designing an effective succession plan for senior executive roles? What are those key factors?
Yeah, Lynn, I think the big factors that I would advise is that the competencies and skills that the person that might have been in the job for 10 or 15 years or 5 years can be vastly different from the competencies and skills you need going forward here. So I think if you're looking about helping your company build a plan for the future, I think it's really important to talk about the competencies that you need. So an example here, in the nonprofit space for years, they look for executives that were very mission-driven, community-based, maybe a grant writer, that kind of stuff, but program person. Today, though that's still important, boards are seeking people that are visionary thinking, high level of emotional intelligence, the key of relationship building, a collaborator, a brand builder. So really varies because your organization's gone through or goes through some type of strategic planning process. You want to make sure that your next people in line have the competence to reach your goal, not just match the competence of what happened yesterday, if that makes any sense.
Makes total sense. It's sort of, keeping track of, what's current and what's needed for the future. Dennis, that makes a lot of sense. Great advice there. So moving to the next consideration in the succession planning realm, Samuel, how do search consultants help organizations ensure a seamless leadership transition?
Welcome to my life. Search partners with firms really are masters of helping companies figure out what they need to solve the problem. Search can only be successful not only in finding the people to what the company needs, but helping the company figure out what they need. And in our experience, many of our clients and companies that we work with know they have a problem, but don't necessarily know how to fix that. And succession planning and that transition part, when we work with a client and we have a strong relationship with them and we understand them and we understand where their business is going, we can really help them figure out what a path can be towards succession planning. Succession planning is a misnomer. Many people have binders of succession planning that when something happens, the binders get thrown out the window. Really, you can plan all you want, and then you actually have to deal with it. Things can be very different than you can even imagine. A great search partner that knows your business and partners with you well can guide you through that. Whether it's search that everybody's going to know about, or many times leadership transition happens behind the curtains, and that's where confidentiality comes in. And a great search partner can ensure that confidentiality to make sure that you're able to find the best person for the business to move forward.
Samuel, thank you. Now, as we move from succession planning to the idea of interim work as a pre-career transition consideration, interim work being a choice, fantastic choice as a next step, the next chapter. Morris, how does interim work benefit both organizations and executives approaching, I don't want to say retirement, but I could say retirement or career transition. How does interim work benefit? What is the benefit there?
Well, if I start with the executive or the individual, and particularly, at when they've done the hard yards and all they have learned, it's a great opportunity to enable the person to leverage their bank of experience, and so that's it's from the interim provider perspective. It's probably a harder spec to get it, but it's experience is required in designing. But and also that's generally part of our portfolio. So the interim is part of somebody's portfolio. The second thing is it can be in a calendar impact more in their own terms. So 2 or 3 days a week or for a period of 3 months. So I think when we get into that realm, it's the two things come to mind are impact, the person's ability to really impact over a shorter period of time, and also the control of their own calendar a little bit more. So that'd be my points on the individual. From the company perspective, or their employer, they get a level of experience and skill that they could not justify on a permanent basis in a lot of cases. So you're also getting objectivity and independence from somebody coming in to deliver on a specific project, and in many cases that can be transformational. And the person isn't part of the establishment, so that's less politics. They're not worried too much about maybe non-good points, and then they're focused on outcomes and delivery. My experience is the legacy can be significant in terms of structures and what's left behind. It's not just the job done, it's what the bigger impact, and it's again, value for money. It's probably costed more as a project than an employee remuneration, so cost benefit analysis, a capital project. So it's win-win when it's done properly.
Wonderful. Thank you, Morris. And then Dennis, are there industries or sectors that you know of that are currently seeing the highest demand for interim? And Morris, I don't know if you can also comment on that after Dennis, would be great.
Yeah, well, in the sector of the economy that we deal with, which is 10% of the workforce of what we call the nonprofit sector, there's a great demand for interim executives because people that were the baby boomers in the 60s and 70s wanting to get involved in social causes are retiring here. And as Morris and others talked about, a lot of boards, why don't want to make a quick change, even if they're doing a search. So they want to have an interim person in it so they can take their time. And so we're seeing that mostly at the CEO level over 3 to 6 months or a year. And we're seeing it across the board, disability association, behavioral health care, children and family services. So that's where I'm seeing it from. Even though I was a corporate executive for 7 years, besides my own company, I see a lot of the need for interim demand in the nonprofit sector.
Thank you, Dennis. And Morris, anything differently from your side of the pond?
I think the main thing would be it's a concept that people struggle more with in the smaller industries, and you need to be confident be willing to pay the money to get it done. So it's there's more courage and required, but the impact is greater. So and Ireland has a big US multinational manufacturing footprint, so that would be a very strong base. So they look after their money, but they see the outcomes for capital well invested.
Wonderful, Morris. And thank you for that. And Simeon, although this is not a question that we planned, but I did tell you I warn you, I'd be asking you questions out of turn. From your experience in the pre-career transition considerations, is there anything we didn't cover here, or anything you'd like to add in terms of what one should consider?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I encounter a lot in coaching is sort of a lack of confidence to step out into the unknown, right? So whenever you're transitioning from one thing to another, there's that risk element of it that takes control. And even if you have those skills that are needed for that next transition, that career, as everyone else has talked about, a lot of times what a coach will do is to help you to reinforce the fact that you can have confidence in your value proposition. So I talk a lot about, transferable skills is one thing, but more importantly is transferable value, right? So when you're thinking about considerations, keeping an open mind is important for any of these roles, if it's interim or full-time. But at the same time, it's kind of, as Maya was saying earlier, I think she put it really well. It's that reflection of, what decisions have you made in the past, and what are you proud of? And what are some of the metrics coming out of that, you really want to do more of? And that can kind of guide your confidence. We don't talk a lot about that because it seems like a weak conversation, but if you really kind of reflect on any change that you've ever made in your life, even if it's not pertaining to career, you've always had to think about and kind of weigh out the cost benefits, but at the same time, take that risk when it's time to. So hopefully that helps.
Very much so. Thank you, Simeon. So now we're going to go to the next section of our discussion, which is, now that you've had the pre-career transition considerations, now let's talk about creating a career pivot strategy. And we'll start off with Maya. in terms of, what do you see as the most common avenues that executives pursue during a career pivot?
I think in the past, especially if people are stepping out of senior executive roles, they wouldn't think about it too much. The default was often, oh, I'll just join 5 boards and spend some more time on the golf course. And I feel like that's changing significantly. And some of it is that I think there's increasingly less excitement about that model, and board roles can be boring, and there's a lot of governance now, and there's less flexibility. You get scheduled up, 2 years in advance. And so a couple of boards may be enough for people, and then it opens up this space for other things. And so, whether it's portfolio work or kind of that consulting advisory, how can I take my expertise and advise around that? We talked a little bit about the nonprofit sector, volunteering, philanthropy, again, depending on what angle you're coming at it from, entrepreneurship, and of course, coaching and mentoring are often things that I hear and see people going into more.
Wonderful, Maya. And as you were talking, I was thinking of yet another question, not on our outline, but do you see a difference in the transition of women, senior executives, women transitioning, and or next gen transitioning, executives transitioning? I know there's often that assumption that it's baby boomers are transitioning, or only men are transitioning. If you could just give me a perspective there for the audience.
Yeah, I think in terms of the types of things they're pursuing, not necessarily, because again, those kind of as broad themes are largely still applicable. But I do think increasingly there are, younger generation, there's big generational divides, and younger generations kind of going, oh, actually this work model doesn't quite work for me, and I want more flexibility, and I want more portfolio work, and I want, or women, and not just classically from coming back from mat leave and choosing. I just think the model is shifting of what, how you can contribute and what comprises work, and, that kind of big economy. And there is, I think you're right to point out, it's not just a question of executives going off into retirement, but as you think about career pivots at all levels and all generations, it's playing out across the board.
Indeed. Oh, we have hands raised there. Samuel, then Dennis.
So a key strategy really needs to be, talk about career pivot. You're a business, and whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur or a consultant, you need to look at your lifelong career as a business. And the pivot strategy is, companies need to change their product strategy and their marketing strategy, and sometimes so do you. And if you think of it that way, rather than, just me selling my time, and the earlier you start then your career, the more you can be open to things. As an executive search consultant, we speak to people who have the experiences that our clients may be looking for, but never necessarily thought about a certain path. You have to keep an open mind, but really know what you want and sell yourself. So those are some things that from career pivot to keep it.